Welcome to Voice Rising with Kara Johnstad. Enjoy weekly conversations with leading luminaries, pioneering visionaries, singers, poets, musicians, and sound healers as we explore the profound role our voice plays on the path to self-realization and global enlightenment. The internationally acclaimed singer, composer, author, healer, recording artist, voice expert, creator of Voice Your Essence, and founder of the School of Voice, Kara Johnstad uses her extraordinary spiritual gifts to empower others. Everything in this world vibrates. Everything has a frequency. A pioneer in the field of voice work and transformational songwriting. Her breakthrough methods are helping thousands of people worldwide fine-tune their body-mind-spirit system and unlock the energetic frequencies of limitless creativity, health, and abundance. Share your voice, ask your questions, join in the conversation. Receive life-changing, positive transformation and rise together to create a sound world. And here's your host, Kara Johnstad.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Voice Rising, the show where we explore the transformative power of voice and dive deep into the realms of consciousness and creativity. Today, I have a very special guest joining me. She is none other than Maia Toll, the acclaimed author behind the best-selling Wild Wisdom series and The Night School. But that's not all. Maia has a brand new book that is going to be released June 27th, which is exactly in less than a week. It's in I guess it's in about a week. It's titled Letting Magic In. And in Letting In, Maia takes us on an extraordinary journey from the bustling streets of Brooklyn to the enchanting landscapes of Ireland. Her memoir asks readers to uncover their own inner magic, igniting a sense of curiosity and wonder. And who among us hasn't felt that craving for a deeper connection with the earth, plants, rock stars, birds? Who hasn't been moved by the scent of blooming jasmine and a beautiful indigo sky? And so today, Maia is with us with her captivating book, and we're going to be exploring the profound meaning of all these feelings and the beauty of connecting with our inner magic. So welcome, Maia, to Voice Rising.
Kara, it is such a pleasure to be here with you.
I love it. It's fabulous. And you are literally not only a best-selling author, but when one reads your books, they're filled with so much sensuality. I guess that would be my word for them. They're just, all the senses are coming alive. And this month you're releasing into the world a memoir, which is, it's fascinating. I wanted to ask, what does it feel like to see your own journey kind of unfold onto print, and then you're releasing it into the world? And what I find so fascinating about voice, it really contains, about books, they contain the voice. I read your book. I was lucky enough to get an early copy. And then everybody in the world, it doesn't matter, in Tokyo or in Berlin or in Georgia or in Chicago, is sitting in the train, in their bedroom, on the sofa, in the kitchen, holding your life experience and stories in their hands and absorbing these beautiful stories. It is pretty mind-blowing. What does it feel like for you?
It's very mind-blowing. What does it feel like? Some moments it feels impossible. Like, how could this happen?
Yeah,
How is this even possible? In other moments, it feels scary. My other books that I put out were about things external to me. So someone might not like my writing, they might not like my voice, they might disagree with me, but it wasn't personal, right?
Right.
My books that are about rocks and stones and birds and bees and herbs, it's not about me. This book is about me and my life. And so when people sit down and have judgment, as humans always do, it's about my choices. And so that's a really interesting thing to contemplate, and just something I've been trying to sit with over the past 9 months, 12 months, just getting ready for it. It feels almost like being pregnant, there's this moment where something's going to come into the world that is of me in a way that some of the other books have not been. And so how do you set up the nursery so that you're ready for, the beautiful moments, but also the brutal moments, because there's potential for both.
There's potential for both. I know the space very well as a songwriter, because you're right, one is very vulnerable. And yet I will say, and I think that's what's going to happen with this book, that's my sense, that what's so magical is that when our stories go out there, and then suddenly the people can realize the humanity in the stories, the different choices, or maybe, you talk about your grandmother's death, you talk about relationship situations that were very hard decisions for you to make. And my feeling, what's happened to me that has been so healing in my own life, is that suddenly we're terrified when these stories come to light, and then suddenly the audience starts to applaud, or they start to honor these stories, and suddenly you're free. It's like released. It's like there's a bigger audience or bigger body carrying some of that grief or some of that difficulty that you went through that was in the end very important. Does it make sense? And in the end, when you feel that reflection, there's something in you, like you said, with a pregnancy, the baby goes out into the world, and then the world starts caring for that creation.
That's a beautiful reflection. And may it be so.
May it be so, right? May it be so. I think,
so.
Yeah. What was different for you? You say a little bit from your other books, but what was it like? Did you have a certain time when these memories would just come up, or did you really sit down? What made you want to write a memoir? You're not that ancient yet. You're not yet 100 years old. So what made you want to, at the young, tender age that you are, what made you want to write a memoir and not another book about crystals or the birds and the bees?
Yeah, so the first book that I really started working on was a memoir back in 2016. Yeah. And I didn't have the chops yet. I didn't have the writing chops yet. I'd been blogging for years. I had taught poetry at an earlier point in my life. So writing was always in the mix for me. But writing a memoir it's challenging on a lot of different levels. And I didn't have the writing chops in 2016. So I had started working on the memoir project while I was on a retreat. And at the head of every chapter was just a very short description of an herb, a plant. And people were charmed by those. And so it became really apparent as I was kind of watching where the energy was going, right? People were so charmed by those little plant descriptions, but the rest of it was still a hot mess. So I thought, well, what can I do with these little plant descriptions? And that became my first book, The Illustrated Herbiary. So I repurposed, that while I kind of kept writing the memoir. And then after the herbiary, it was successful. My publisher said, let's do something else. And I said, well, there are 3 ancient medicine kingdoms: animal, vegetable, mineral. Why don't we do all of them? So that's how that first series came to be. But meanwhile, the story that has felt like my story is the one that I finally got to write in Letting Magic In, that I finally had the chops to write in Letting Magic In. And the reason that I, really wanted to get that particular story out into the world is because I know I'm not the only one who's felt disconnected from my own life, who's felt like, I'm living life and it's working. One of the things that people are always surprised about is this is not a story of unhappiness to happiness. I was actually quite happy. I had lovely people in my life, and I was living in an interesting town, and things were swimming along in their own way. But there was a spiritual disconnect. There was a void where God should be. And I use the word God in kind of the broadest sense. It's a word that has at various times in my life been very triggering. But at this point, I think of it as a universal term for that kind of connection with spirit. And so that piece felt missing. And I was looking for it. And I didn't, I didn't quite know where to find it. And so having found a path to connection, having found a path to spirit, having found a path to feeling at home in myself, I wanted to share the story of the journey because we have a lot of books out there that are kind of like self-help books. Go do this and go do that. But sometimes you do those things and you're like, well, that didn't work, or I don't know that I feel any different. And so for me, as a person who connects deeply with story, more so than with instruction, I wanted to share the story, the tale, the journey, so that other people could grab the breadcrumbs. They're like, oh, I'm not on the same journey, but I'm seeing a reflection of my journey. And I understand that, like, it's worth it to keep going forward.
Yeah, or just the connectivity to realize that we're all journeying home. Somehow I think Ram Dass said that we're all walking each other home, and we sometimes forget that it's such a miracle. We landed somehow here on this planet that's spinning in outer space, and at some point we're not here anymore. So how can we make the time that we're here a place of belonging? I mean, belonging is a word that you use a lot in your book. Or how can we connect to not only our family, but maybe that bird feeder in the yard, or the whippoorwill, or even the windmill that's sitting on the hill, or like, how can we do that? I mean, in your book, when you open your book, I wanted to share these lines because I think they're very beautiful. You often weave in also quotes from people, and your book in the beginning, it opens with the lines from Jessica Dawn Palmer, and the lines read, "In ancient times, magic was not thought to be supernatural or paranormal. It was seen as a capacity to bring creative thought into physical reality." I love that so much. It's like we take something a thought that matters and we turn it into matter, right? That is like alchemy. What would be, after this, so many years journeying, what would be your definition of magic? Like, what is magic for you?
Yeah, I chose that quote to put right up front because it really is my definition of magic. I feel like even when we're doing something like ritual, what we're doing is we're taking something from within us, an idea, an intention, a prayer, a spell, whatever you want to call it, and we're birthing it into the material world. We're making manifest. And that, to me, is magic. That ability to take something from nothingness and give it physical form.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you do that with song. You take something from within you and you put it out into the world as vibration. It's magic.
Yeah, I often tell people, but it's our secret that I'm actually selling hot air. It's our little secret. Don't tell anybody. Yeah. I mean, let me go here. You talk a lot, which is, you don't talk a lot. You have so many different beautiful moments in this book. It's really a magical book. I actually, while I was reading it, I was thinking of so many friends that I wanted to gift it to. And I think because of those qualities, because of the quality of it's not a to-do, it's not a self-help, but in the end, one feels seen. One feels like, wow, I'm honoring this journey, and this journey is not easy. It's like, it's like the beauty of a tree with like a broken limb, and at the same time, you see the leaves, blossoming at the same time that branch is hanging down or something. It is poetry. I mean, your book, everybody who loves poetry knows that it's not just about, light and blue skies. There's always something that's in the process of being created or transformed or amended. And I think, for me at least, while I was reading your book, that was the fascination, to see how these different moments were coming together. And you talk about a little bit also the disconnect. You say, we're taught that doctors know our bodies and priests know our souls, but deep down there is a longing to be one with the stars, to caress the rose petal to our skin, to hold the broken seashell. And all of us, I think, out there remember times where we've walked along the beaches and we're collecting pebbles and putting little shells in our pockets and kind of looking at the footprints that we're leaving on the beach. And you also talk about that our Western culture doesn't really have a model for this deep interiority, or we don't really have a map. We don't really have a plan, right? We're staring at our iPads or our phones, and in the evenings, and not necessarily looking at the moon. So do you hope to inspire readers to find their own inner compass and explore that wild, rugged terrain that they have inside?
Absolutely. I was a philosophy major way back when in undergrad, and
Gotcha.
I loved the Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle. There's such a sense of the material world being a portal for the spiritual world. And I think we've lost that a bit. I see, like when I see on Instagram, people moving towards like a more witchy conception of the world. I think what they're grabbing for is the ability to find spirit in the material world. Like the witchy path is a path of herbs and crystals and tools. And I think that we long to be able to connect through the world we're encountering all the time, the pebbles on the beach, the petals of a rose. And so to be able to begin to see all these experiences as portals, as doorways into ourselves, into the deeper realms of spirit. One of kind of the oldest philosophical sayings is "as above, so below." Everything's a mirror, and so when they look at pictures of galaxies, they look similar to pictures of ourselves. It's crazy the way that the external world mirrors the internal world.
You see that the trees that are giving us oxygen, right? I mean, and if you look at the branches, and then people show you pictures of your lungs, and they look like the branches of the tree, and you're like, wow, that is crazy. I was going to ask you, with all the, we're facing, some pretty challenging times. We have not only we have animal extinction, we have language extinction. We're losing words. Nobody believes this, but you had some wonderful words. I was highlighting them. You just were fabulous. I just loved it. And I was thinking, we can't protest enough, and all this idea, we need to work for climate change, but I was going to ask you, do you think that if we would take the time to learn the art of connecting back to the wind, the spirit, the oceans, the moan of the earth, the cat's meow, like just to really make that our home, that it would be much easier for us to honor and protect this beautiful mystery that we're living in. It just seems like we're learning it in the books, and it's not happening. We know climate change is happening, and it's not happening. But I kind of think it's from the disconnect, because if one reads, for example, your book, one wants to immediately protect the farmers markets, the bookstores, the little bookstores. Like, we're not buying on the internet. I mean, I know your book is available on the internet, but still, the little bookstores. Immediately protect the rugged coast of Ireland. Like, we've lost the connection, and that is why climate change is so difficult to turn around. Thoughts?
Well, first of all, you brought tears to my eyes, Kara. Thank you. I mean, if my book does that, then it has far exceeded all my hopes for it. If everyone who reads it realizes that there's a lot worth protecting, and every small thing we can do is worth doing. One of my favorite books, I read it in high school, and I've reread it many times since, is E.M. Forster's Howard's End. And a lot of people have seen the movie, but not so many people have read the book. The book begins with the epigraph, "Only connect." And then that becomes a thread that is woven through, this idea of, if we can only find these connections, that we will begin to transform our lives.
Yeah.
And it's really become a life mission for me. How do we connect? How do we pull ourselves into relationship, not just with humans, but with the entire world around us? I went to a writing workshop with the guy who wrote a book called Jitterbug Perfume, which it's an oldie but goodie, Tom Robbins. And he's outrageous, but in the best possible way. Like, it's delicious. And, someone asked him, how do you make all these things that seem so disparate go together? And he said, I treat it like an exercise. I sit down and I think, well, how does the moon connect with a Twinkie? How does a firefly connect with a tire? And he traces the path of connection. It's like 6 degrees of separation, but in the material world. And I love doing that, because everything does ultimately connect if you sit down and think about it. And once you see that, you realize that there's this incredible spider web of life that we are a part of, and that we are connected to and with. And after you see it, you can't see it.
I mean, just the thought that we're breathing the same air that Marilyn Monroe breathed in and out, or that Gandhi, I mean, just the thought that, like, I don't know, I'm in Berlin, Germany, so literally on the forest path across from my house, Kafka lived 5 minutes away. So that his feet have touched that same earth.
Yes.
Right? And that is kind of this multidimensionality that kind of blows you away sometimes, because you're like, I mean, you're in the here and now, but at the same time, there's layers of other people, and the air, we don't get more and more air. It just keeps on getting recycled. I always say that writers and artists and singers, we're the best, actually, climate activists because we've been recycling tones and words. We have only 12 tones to play with, so we keep on recycling them. And Chopin had the same 12 words. Beethoven had the same 12 words. Kara Johnstad had 12 tones, right? And, John Cage had the same ones. And it's always a different thing on it, a different spin. I mean, also your words, have been used before, but it's the magic of you breathing life into them with your own experience and your own intention that makes new connections, that brings us to a different place when we hold that book and when we hear that story revolve, through our mind. Exactly. Maia, we're going to have to take a very small break for our sponsors, and then we're going to be back with more magic, I guess. Okay, so don't go anywhere. And in a couple moments, we're going to be back.
Okay.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
With happy clients all over the world, Kara Johnstad knows that your voice is the missing link to more authenticity, abundance, creativity, and health. An internationally acclaimed voice expert, Kara's breakthrough methods have helped thousands of people successfully heal their voice wounds and extinguish the story of self-doubt and shyness forever. Join in group trainings, attend online sessions, schedule one-on-one time, and invite Kara to work with your organization and community. Get started today. Go to www.karajohnstad.com and receive a special guided meditation designed to fine-tune your inner voice and welcome you on the voice journey.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Voice Rising. We do hope you enjoyed that lovely break. And if you are enjoying the show and the magical insights shared by Maia Toll, we invite you to leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform and hit the subscribe button and never miss an episode of Voice Rising. It helps us bring you awesome guests, actually, just like Maia is. And so now let's immerse ourselves once again in this beautiful conversation and unravel more secrets about our inner magic. Welcome back, Maia. I wanted to, I guess I wanted to talk about this word, which I think you love. The word is weird, okay? And weird, you bring up in your book, is it derives from the Old English noun weird, which is W-Y-R-D. And I know it because, again, I'm sitting here in Berlin. It's also a Germanic word. In Germany, it's the word, it's linked to the word werden or or it's W-E-R-D, is to be or to become. And it's very closely linked to those who could control fate. So talk about the great pleasure that you have at being a weirdo or being weird.
Well, one of my big weirdoness, weird oddities, is that I love words, and I love words, and I love like feeling them in my mouth, rolling them around, seeing how they string together, and then I also love researching them and figuring out where they came from, where they've been. When you talk about the layers of history in a place, there's layers of history in a word.
Yes.
It's been dragged through time. It's been used by so many people to mean so many different things. So I'm constantly exploring words and how they're evolving and how they're not evolving. I can get very resistant to the evolution of words. Leave them alone, please. And then I have to remind myself that, just like us humans, words change and grow and take on new meanings. So weird was originally connected to fate, to being able to see fate. And I love that we just toss this word around now. We call people weirdos and call people weird and odd when they're not falling into the usual patterns. And oftentimes,
yet it's, I was going to say
it's those people who are seeing something different.
Right.
Right.
That are actually helping us perhaps evolve in a, well, I mean, they're breaking the norm in some sense and helping evolution to create something new.
Yes. Which we desperately need, right? Yeah. We need people who can vision something different.
Here's to the misfits.
Here is to the misfits.
You talk about also, which I love, you talk a lot about words and spells. I also love words. I just really enjoy, I think also holding them on my tongue, I mean, people say, where have your feet traveled to? And I always say, do you know how many stories have passed over your tongue? I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but it's like, we have so many things, our whole tongue, like how much food and how many words. I was like, wow, that's like a contemplation there. But wow. It is.
Kara, Kara, I just had a moment. I am about to, after this book releases and I'm not doing radio and podcasts anymore, I have to have a surgery in my mouth to release a tongue tie. And it's just fascinating to put it in that metaphoric realm. Here I am, a writer with a tongue tie.
Well, your language is released. Yeah, I mean, it might release a lot of energy, but I can also show you, I mean, that's just, you can snip it and release a tongue tie, and one can also do stretching exercises with the tongue and stretch that muscle. So you don't necessarily have to snip it. The snipping is the quick fix.
I'm in the middle of all those exercises because now they make you do all those exercises for 6 weeks beforehand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I am making unbelievable faces and
doing tongue rolls.
The tongue rolls, and I have to use my lips in different ways. So I have this giant button, and I was supposed to hang a water bottle from the button.
Oh my goodness!
I then bend over at the waist and have to hold it at my lips, but I couldn't find a water bottle, and I have this bottle of grain alcohol that I got at the beginning of the pandemic when we needed things to clean the counters with and stuff. And I never used it up. So I'm literally bent at the waist holding this bottle of grain alcohol on a string with a button in my mouth. It's a ridiculous image.
Well, it kind of reminds me of the phrase when people used to, when people were talking too much and they say button up or zip it up, or, they actually told you to stop expressing. It's like, button it, It's crazy. I mean, I guess good for you. I'm amazed that it's happening because your language is very clear. You speak eloquently and beautifully. So it's hard for me to imagine that you've got your tongue tied in a way, but why not?
It was hard for me when they told me. I was like, no, I don't believe you. But it's tied to some other things that are going on. And when they trace all the pathways, talk about interconnection.
Yes.
It's pulling my spine out of alignment.
Wow.
So I was like, after they traced all the pathways, I was like, oh wow, because it's fascia, and fascia is like this it's a giant web through your body, connecting all your different parts. So I took some convincing, but after I saw the interconnectedness and the web, I was like, oh, I get this. I see I see how this could really shift things.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that you have a spine, but books also have a spine? Isn't that a funny connection?
I hadn't thought of that before.
Yeah. That's kind of cool. Talk to us about the power of rhyme and rhythm, and how by putting rhythm and rhyme together, you can turn an ordinary sentence into a chant, a prayer. What is the secret power when we start falling in love with rhymes and the rhythm of words?
Yeah. So I'm fascinated at this this way that we take language and manipulate it into something else. I became especially interested in this idea of spells because it's such a double boil and trouble kind of word to me, and I didn't like it at first. I was like, ugh, that's Disney. It's so strange and odd to me that people are thinking of themselves as, speaking in the way of the evil witches, and that is somehow appealing. And so whenever I find these things that are irking me, like the word God, I've got to dig deeper and figure out what it is that's behind it. And what I realized is that something happens when you take words and you start rolling them around a little bit differently. Once they find a cadence, and I say they find a cadence because what I've found is that when I try to force it, it doesn't happen. But if I am in a flow where I am creating, right? We talked about magic as creation, as kind of pulling something from the nothing into the material world, that my words will start to first take on cadence, and then without any effort at all, they'll start to rhyme. And I was like, oh, this is what people mean by a spell. It's when you end up with that churn, rhythm as kind of that ticking churn that builds energy. And that's what you're trying to do with your words. You're trying to build energy. And so I think that, if we were, and I'm kind of spitballing here because I'm realizing as I'm talking that for me, a spell builds energy. And it's that, when you fall into the cadence and the rhythm and then the rhyme, you're actually enlarging the energy around you. You're pushing outward. Oftentimes for me, prayers are more lyrical, but they don't tend to fall into rhyme. they'll often fall into cadence. And so oftentimes they're soothing, they're quieting energy. Like they're having almost the opposite effects. Instead of building, because I'm calling something new into the world, I'm self-soothing by falling into like almost that lullaby cadence, and calming my nervous system down. So I'm using rhyme and rhythm and language to build or to release.
Well, I always like this craziness that the word, I mean, we say in the beginning there was word, and some people say in the beginning there was word and the word was God, right? But then if we listen to the sound of word, then we have the sound of world, and then we have WORLD, but you were talking about the spinning energy that happens when we create spells, and we also have WHIRLED, to whirl. And we spin tails, don't we? We spin tails, and we're whirling in outer space, and we're whirling in this world. And when our tongue is too lazy, the L and the D are in the same place, so we just say word.
Yeah.
We just say word. We say we're whirling in a world, and then we have word, and then we start to drop into deeper silence, and that's how we do. Talk to us about the power of naming things. You write in your book that naming has been a powerful symbol in your life, and that you think all the screwing around with your name has been in search for your true name, and the purpose in this life to be named truly is to be called.
So I have always read a lot of fantasy novels, and there's a thread through these books of like wizards and such not revealing their true name, because if someone has your name, they can call you. They have power over you.
Powerful thought.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So the idea of a name as being something by which others can call you, and you can call yourself. You can call yourself home with a true name. Has always resonated for me. And so I don't want to give too much away from the book, but naming and how we name things becomes a key piece of my own journey. And yeah, I don't feel like I can go into it without giving too much away. So I'm gonna just to be
and just to be curious, because you are out there in the world with your name, and that's your birth name. And I already told you at the beginning of the show before we went on air that the word Toll means great and fabulous in German. So I've already shared that secret with Maia. So, but I know for me sometimes my name, Kara Johnstad. I mean, my mother called me Kara, but it's like everybody calls you Kara. And when I write, sometimes I end up signing my writing with like bird or kite or river, or like it feels like the name is so exposed somehow that I need something more intimate. Do you also find yourself sometimes having that public name, but also kind of wanting a new name just for a certain process or certain intimacy, just for you?
Yeah. I think I understand the feeling that you're describing. I think that where I go is wanting no name.
Yeah.
When you are in the public eye so much, sometimes you just want to disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to have that like very quiet, very invisible time. Yeah. The nameless time.
The nameless time. The nameless time. What role? I mean, we have that intimate time, so we can go to two places now. We could, we can go to the place of where do you love to write? Is it the morning hours, like in that intimacy? And we can go to the other place, which is the opposite, which is what role does community play in your creative journey, and how has your community shaped your writing as a writer? So you get to choose. Do you want to go into that intimacy and alone time? And you did have a beautiful line, but I didn't write it down, but it was like the stillness of song and the longing of language or something. I remember this line from your book suddenly. Yeah, you're very, very, you really use words so beautifully, Maia. It's really a, I really cherish somebody who can keep words so alive. It's like it's like when you read your book, it's like watching a kite fly in the sky, and it's like dipping and diving, and you take us somewhere, and then we feel all the senses, they're coming alive. So where would you like to go? Would you like to tell us about where you are when you're a no name? Like when you're totally hanging out in your sweatpants and your big sweaters and sipping your coffee and cocooned? Or would you like to talk about community?
It's interesting because I actually think that they're the same continuum, right? Mm-hmm. So they're in some ways the same thing. Writing is, I'm not the first person to say this, a very lonely process in the moment. And I'm not a structured writer. What I mean by that is, so many people will say to you, I wake up at 6 o'clock and I write before breakfast, or, I do X, Y, and Z, and then I sit down and I write. I write when I feel like writing. Mm-hmm. And within that, I'm intensely disciplined. So I'm not a writer who misses deadlines. When I sit down to write, I sit down and I work. Mm-hmm. But within that, I'm very, very gentle with myself. My health is weird. Back to the word weird. And so if I wake up and I'm off, there's no point in pushing myself to write. Yeah. That's useless. There's no point in me having a schedule that I might not keep. So I'm very flexible with myself, and I ignore a lot of the kind of modern day entrepreneurial rules. The don't work on the weekends, protect your downtime. I don't do any of that. Because I take my downtime when I need my downtime. So if I want to work, I work, and if I want to not work, I don't work. But within that, one of the things that is so supportive is community. And I have both an online writing group that is people from all over the United States, so different time zones. We rarely get to see each other in person. And then I also have my local group that we sit in a coffee shop actually together. And nice. That's important time, both just for sanity and for exploring connection, but also because we all have so many different points of view and angles from which we view the world. And you write from your own individual angle and point of view. And sometimes, I realize that my angle is obstructed. When I sit down and I read to my groups and I watch their eyes squint up in confusion, I realize that, I'm seeing things from an angle which just doesn't work for other people. And so I feel like it's so important to remember when you're an author, like if you're journaling, if you're writing for yourself, you don't need to remember this. But when you're writing as an author putting something out in the world, this is a form of communication. And so you have to make sure that you're speaking a language that other people are speaking, you have to find a common tongue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And within that, still allow it to be your voice. And so that's a balance, to both be writing from what's true for you, but also making sure that you're communicating.
Yeah, and that other people, I guess communicating also links to that word communion or community, right? I mean, it's all kind of one, which brings us inside communion is, of course, and communication is, of course, the moon. Maybe communication is with the moon. That's pretty witchy, right?
It's very witchy.
It's very witchy. What would you, as we come to a close, it just seems like this time has flown so fast. It's been so lovely to have you on the show. What message or takeaway would you hope that readers or listeners would gain from letting magic in after they have read it and given at least 10 copies to their favorite people at Christmas?
I think for me, the thing that I most want people to see, to witness, is that walking a spiritual path, your soul's path, can lead you into some dark places, and it will also lead you out again. And that, it's okay to walk up to the edge. It's okay to look over the edge and to see what's there. And you're not the first person who stood on that edge and wondered, like, am I going to be able to come back from this place?
Yeah.
Right? Do I have wings? Can I fly over this particular cliff? And so just showing people, and what I've really focused on in this memoir is trying to keep it grounded, trying to keep it earthbound, trying to keep it understandable for those of us embodied, living a material life, interacting with the physicality around us. Because sometimes I've read spiritual memoirs, and they are memoirs of the spirit and not memoirs of an embodied spirit. And this is really a memoir of an embodied spirit. So, you're going to get yourself into some virtually sticky situations, and you're also going to remember that you're in a body, you're in a skin, and that's actually going to be your saving grace.
Beautiful. I thank you, Maia, so much for sharing your wisdom and insights and the magic of your embodied journey with us. And at Voice Rising, we are wishing you so much success with your new book. And I know it's going to inspire many, many readers. And for you, dear listeners, go get yourself a copy. And thank you for joining us on this transformative exploration. I invite you to stay connected as we bring you more interviews. And until then, Maia, let's keep on living the magic, and everybody else out there too. You guys are alchemists. You're magical beings. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kara.
Okay. Bye-bye.